You're listening to Precinct 444, a podcast network from the National Law Enforcement Museum. Today we're bringing you an episode from the Encore series, where we revisit past museum programs and conversations. Part 2 of Preventing Death by Suicide concludes with discussions about selecting the right leader for a program, disseminating that program regionally, and navigating confidentiality to protect law enforcement professionals, followed by a Q&A. In case you missed part 1 of this discussion, this program is about narrowing down on the key building blocks and organizational structures used to build a successful wellness program to help prevent death by suicides within the law enforcement profession. The discussion features chiefs of police and peer support specialists from across the country to combine their many resources and best practices into one program. With National Police Week 2023 quickly approaching, Precinct 444 thought it would be appropriate to honor these fallen officers from years past who took their own lives. And now for part 2 of Preventing Death by Suicide, a chief-to-chief leadership wellness discussion.
Next, we're going to move to selecting the right leader for your wellness program. And to help us with that is District of Columbia Chief Peter Newsham and his staff. So, Chief, it's all yours.
So I want to thank Marcia and the National Law Enforcement Officer Memorial Museum for hosting this really important event. I really want to thank you for keeping this critical issue out there and people thinking about officer wellness. I know you played a big role in the PERF report that came out just about a year ago, but you have really served in a leadership position for all of us, and I want to personally thank you for that. You know what they say, and I heard this from a couple of the speakers earlier, that if we are going to reform policing in America and in our cities across this country, we need to ensure that we have a workforce that is well. That they're physically well, and that, of course, that they're mentally well, because you know what they say about hurt people, they hurt people. And we can't have a workforce in this environment that is out there hurting people. So, how did I select somebody to run our wellness program? First, I took the advice from the PERF report, understanding that this was going to be a culture change. And I selected someone that was a direct report of mine, one of our executive directors, Ben Heyman. And I selected him because he was a person who I trusted would not only collaborate with the mental health professionals, but also collaborate within the agency so that you could have buy-in from the folks who are going to use this program. We need to really, this stigma that it surrounds people looking for help who have mental health issues really has to be eradicated. And we've been living with it in policing from the very beginning of time. So you need somebody who is, when you're a police chief and you're dealing with all of the things we deal with, when you're dealing with crime, when you're dealing with civil unrest, you're dealing with police reform, you're dealing with politicians and government officials, you need somebody who's a direct report that's constantly reminding you of the importance of officer wellness for us to be successful in policing. So 3 of the programs that Ben has been very successful in developing for us, we have a mandatory policing for resilience training for all of our officers. It's called the neuropsychology of emotional wellness in law enforcement. We've also created a sergeant leadership and peer support team. So because we all know that the peer support can oftentimes be more effective than the support that's coming from the leaders. And then we've also developed a free elective courses that are given at our training academy, whereby officers can pick from a menu of items where they can receive training from our folks at the academy. So I'm going to let Ben chime in and talk a little bit more about those in detail.
Thank you, Chief, and it's a pleasure to be here with everyone today. So as we looked at our different programs and really our philosophy around wellness programs, we convened a very diverse panel of experts, both within the agency and throughout the city. What we found through doing that process is there were a lot more resources than initially we might have come up with by really pulling everyone to the table. And so before the pandemic, we had everyone literally around a table, not only from within the agency and officers and civilian staff members that were very passionate about wellness services, whether that was our athletic trainer who was dedicated to working with officers and civilian members actually at our academy, to our city's nutrition coordinator and other services. And so, really convening that panel of kind of experts, what we found is we could connect a lot of the different services to really reach and give kind of a more wraparound approach to what our officers needed. That brought in the idea as a part of our professional development training to build out a course, as the chief mentioned, called the Neuropsychology of Emotional Wellness for Law Enforcement. Leveraging Dr. Beverly Anderson and the Metropolitan Police Employee Assistance Program, which has been working with our employees for well over 3 decades now, we developed a 5-part series that really looks and focuses on officer resilience. The first piece of that course educates officers about the stress response. What is it? What is officer resiliency? And really introducing kind of key terms that are relevant in the conversation. And part of this, and making it a part of a mandatory professional development course, is building that baseline of knowledge and building that conversation and that openness to talking about emotional wellness. We then continue in and really dive into some of the science around the evolution of the brain, human brain to include memory and the importance and the impact of traumatic events on the brain. Further in the course, we talked about unpredictability and stress within the law enforcement profession and managing the work-life balance. As we get into the 4th part of the series, we dive into a term called police trauma syndrome, and really to kind of give a concrete association. While many people associate holidays with pleasant thoughts and memories, officers who respond to calls for service, in particular violent calls for service on these days that everyone else holds as really a celebratory event, have these memories associated with bad things that happen. And so really introducing that conversation about what is trauma. In the 5th part and kind of the longest part, we talk about self-soothing behaviors, both things that are positive and negative. Earlier in the session here today, we heard statistics about the ills that can happen in the policing profession, alcohol abuse, and all sorts of other pieces. And we really talk from a neuroscience perspective in this course. At a high level, our sergeant leadership course, we realize that those most impactful to the officers are those frontline supervisors. And while we can sit at headquarters and try to roll out kind of a broad plan for the agency, those frontline supervisors know their people best. They know when burnout and compassion fatigue are occurring. And we try to give the skills and resources to our frontline supervisors so that they can really intervene and help our officers. And finally, those wraparound courses, we've tried to be creative and pull in and a lot of free community resources as well, from yoga to other type wellness programs that we offer voluntarily now in a hybrid in-person and virtual format. But we try to provide those services to really benefit our people.
Well, thank you to our partners from the District of Columbia. And next, Superintendent Martin Bruce from Vancouver will share with us the regional approaches to sharing your wellness programs with other agencies. And this is of particular interest to medium to smaller size law enforcement agencies that don't have the capacity and or the budget, and how you could successfully create wellness in your region. Superintendent Bruce, it's all yours.
Thank you very much, and I really appreciate the opportunity to join you folks today and add a bit of a Canadian flavor to the conversation, and I bring greetings from Chief Alan Palmer and the men and women of the Vancouver Police Department here in British Columbia. So my topic, as I mentioned, is discussing partnerships among regional agencies and leveraging those resources. And in doing so, you'll hear how we at the VPD leverage relationships and develop programs, not only with other police departments, but with our police union, medical professionals, and nonprofit groups that are dedicated to really assisting police officers and other first responders and veterans and help them build mental health resiliency and suicide prevention. So I'm going to run through some of the initiatives that we have and who we've partnered with. So it may sound like a bit of a course listing, but the key point to focus on is who we have partnered with in developing the program. So we have a brand new trauma resiliency training course that we've developed in collaboration with an organization called Wounded Warriors Canada. They're a national health service provider committed to supporting veterans and first responders. And that program is also in collaboration with the University of British Columbia, Victoria in British Columbia. They're interested in studying police psychology and police resilience, just based in the context of modern policing. So that program, we're just rolling that out. It will go into the police academy, courtesy of the instructors that will be providing the academy. So just as mentioned by other panelists, this is very much a hire to retire type program to build resiliency in members. Reactionary things are great, but we're firm believers, and you need to get into the academy, get them peer support right there, get them training right there, and start off that hire to retire criterion. Another resiliency and policing program that we're building is in collaboration between, again, the police union, our police foundation, and WorkSafe, likely better to know you folks as workers' compensation. And that utilizes research psychologists who lead a 4-day program off-site in a rural setting, and sort of gets our members out of police buildings and being able to talk about issues. We have 2 equine therapy programs that are on ranches, again, in the interior of our province here. One, again, is with Wounded Warriors Canada. The other one is with an organization called Can Praxis, and it's privately funded. And both these programs are open to first responders who have PTSD or some other form of occupational stress injury. We coupled with the federal department called the Canadian Institute for Public Safety and Research. And the purpose of that was to roll out a program called R2MR. Some of you may be familiar with that. It was initially developed for the Canadian Department of National Defence. And that focuses on, changing, again, at the early part of a member's career, getting them used to identifying stressors and addressing them in those early stages. For families, previous panelists have spoken about the impact on families of being having a sworn member as a spouse. And so we've partnered with the Vancouver chapter of Beyond the Blue. And those folks are sort of peer-led families of first responders. I'm sure you have similar organizations in the US, but it's one of those other programs that we're able to roll out in a partnership. We also are partnering with a society called the Honor House Society. They basically provide a residence here in the lower mainland of British Columbia, Vancouver area. It's obviously very expensive, and that helps folks that are coming into the area and perhaps have to have a stay in hospital. Their families can rest up there. Working with other agencies in the region here, we do have 20 plus police members that are on a committee that's focused on a unified approach to returning to work after a critical incident. And that's obviously from the psychological perspective. As we've heard, members are benched for a certain period of time, and then we expect them to roll back into the agency. So there's a structured process for doing that. And that committee, they all learn from each other on what best practices are in that realm. We also have a University of British Columbia. We're partnering with them and the Vancouver Police Union. They're doing a workplace survey to ascertain what the impacts are of police oversight. We have two different levels of civilian oversight on police here in British Columbia. So they're actually surveying the members on the stresses that are involved in that kind of environment when a member's faced with disciplinary action or perhaps criminal charges, and the importance, certainly from my perspective in that realm, of having a very close relationship between human resources and professional standards, as we would call them, or your internal affairs, on specific key moments in an investigation where a member is going to need additional supports. We also have a linkage between our regional CISM, Critical Incident Stress Management folks. 12 members of that committee, again, discuss best practices and, leveraging the best challenges, successes in responding to those critical incidents and supporting members through them. In summary, we will, recognizing the limitations of our own funding for initiatives, of which we have around 20, there's great opportunity in leveraging with other non-police agencies, some of which are panelists here today. Great benefit in that, and I think it takes a combined effort of all the resources available, not just between police departments, but nonprofits and the private sector, universities, to get as much help in this area as we possibly can. That was quite a lot in a few minutes. I don't want to belabor, but can certainly answer any questions in the appropriate segment.
Well, thank you, Superintendent Bruce. I really appreciate that. And next, we're going to turn to Boston, Sergeant Joe King. We're going to talk about navigating confidentiality, disciplinary processes, and outreach in wellness to understand the firewall that we must have and how to successfully navigate that. Sergeant, all yours.
Thank you for having us off. The Commissioner Gross is appreciative that the department was invited, and in these matters, I'm often asked to speak and represent the department. The biggest issue we have, I think, in getting two officers is ensuring their confidentiality when they're working with us and through our peer support unit. We have somewhat of a bifurcated structure that is set up within the department through the peer support, where even though myself and my team and my personnel fall directly underneath the commissioner, we almost live in a world of don't ask, don't tell with the commissioner's office, and it also helps insulate us from other command structures and issues that are going on that might have questions as to what's going on with a certain officer. So our biggest issue is ensuring the officers that when they come to us, whatever they speak to us about is going to be held in the highest and utmost confidentiality. That being said, that a lot of these officers are coming in, as we said here, navigating the disciplinary process, usually because I like to say they're in the soup or their pants are on fire. Or by the time they end up with us, we're getting, we've been around for a long time, and a lot of our supervisors are very good. We're getting the heads up from a supervisor. Hey, could you reach out to this person? Could you look at this person? I don't want to know what's going on, but we think there's something happening. They're getting into trouble. They're calling in sick. There's been issues, rumors, things of that nature. So we try to proactively reach out that way and head people off before they get too far down the road of the disciplinary process and before they become too much of a liability for the department in and of itself, which is unfortunately how a lot of these officers do come on our radar. It's a hidden, their pain is hidden, and it's usually based out of shame and fear for job security is the reality. So our biggest thing is ensuring them that we are not a fit for duty environment when they come to spec to us. They're not going to be evaluated for fit for duty. They're going to be offered confidentiality in a secure place to find help. Now, like we said, with the disciplinary process, a lot of these officers, and I liked what the Chief Roster had said earlier, too, regardless of the outcome of what the disciplinary process is for these officers. And I think that's an important note, that they know that regardless what happens with them with the department, whether they're suspended or heaven forbid fired or whatever the case may be, that we're not going to be walking away from them. as a department and on a whole. They will still be able to use our services, reach out to us, and still be received by us. And I think that's the biggest reinforcement of the confidentiality to the officers. The biggest fear most officers I find have is being taken offline. You know, the irony of a police officer is they love to complain about the job, but they wouldn't leave it in 30 seconds. It's just one of those things, and they don't want to be revealed, but they want the help, and they just don't know a lot about it. So what we do is we're peer led, like I said earlier, clinician supported. So when we're able to get officers into counseling and therapy, and it's through contracted clinicians that we have exclusive access to that specialize in dealing just with police officers and first responders. And it's proven to be a very good tool. And what's happened is for a lot of the supervisors now, they're able to call us and ask us to help them with troubled officers before we get too far down the road. I think the biggest thing that was said in here is resiliency, and I'll leave it with this: our CISM team members, our officers who are volunteers at work that report to us once a month for monthly training. They're all assigned to the different districts and stations throughout the city, and they're the eyes and ears of what we do, and they're the ones who watch out for the signs, the symptoms that were discussed earlier in this program. So, like I said, the biggest thing is that the management understands that we can't tell them everything, but we're not going to also be without, how should I say it, without reason, and leave them out of the loop. But whatever they do is they do within the discipline, and whatever we do for recovery, we do with recovery, and we keep those things separate. Resiliency is our primary mission, not fit for duty. And I think if those are understood, we're usually on good grounds, and we're able to get a lot of work done, a lot of officers in work and staying working. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Sergeant King. Next, we're going to go into our question and answers. We've collected a bunch online, so I'll start with those. The first one is, can civilian volunteers help officers that are having issues with their work? And what I'd like to do is turn to Josh from Boulder Crest Foundation to talk about how, as a not-for-profit, they could help.
You know, I think that, and I come at this as a civilian, right? I'm neither a first responder nor a law enforcement person. And I mean, I just, it's a very foreign world from the world I came in. And I think one of the things that perspective offers me, if I'm willing to listen, right, is to actually have a unfettered understanding of what's happening. So I'm not a mental health professional or any of these things. And so it forces me to be humble and simply to listen. And I think one of the things we've consistently heard from both law enforcement and first responders and from the military community is they feel as though engaging and interacting with the traditional mental health system often leads them with the sense that the rest of their life is going to be a fraction of what it used to be. That basically, if you go through enough difficult stuff, your life is essentially doomed. And that's a recipe for hopelessness and suicide. And I think that there are opportunities for lots of people, I think, to be part of the solution, if you will. And I think it's super important for us to understand, and for me to understand, is there is something about having a first responder with a first responder, someone like Bernie, who's been there and done it, and a veteran with a veteran, that fast forwards a conversation to like the 8th chapter of the book, as opposed to starting at the very beginning. And so I think that certainly all of us have an opportunity to play a role. And I think it's essential to realize that there is something, and I know it's been talked about earlier, it's just there's something about healthy, trained peers, right? Not just peers, but healthy, trained peers who understand it. And I think the other piece of that for me is, in all of the stuff I've heard, I think to add in this notion of post-traumatic growth is to suggest that your life is not on some downward trajectory, but that you can in fact grow from all the experiences you've been through, injects hope. And again, that is the antidote to suicide, is hope, is the belief that tomorrow could be better than yesterday.
Thank you, Josh. The next question, do you think it is important that young recruits get exposure to what critical care is like and destigmatize mental health while in the academy? And I'll turn to our friends from the Los Angeles Police Department. They hit on this a little bit during their discussion, and I'll let them expand on this question.
Thank you. Absolutely. I think that that is actually where we help normalize from the beginning that you can both handle the rigors of this job, but also have access to an emotional range. We always say that you can have any emotion in law enforcement. You just have to channel it through mission, vision, and values. And so we have a framework for talking about that very early on in the academy, but we also facilitate really deeper discussions on race, on disparity, on equity, on violence, all those things, and how they historically have impacted uh, communities of color in a different way. And so that often brings up a lot of emotion. And what we have to really do is train our officers and our trainers to facilitate that emotion and not tell people to shove it down, to bring it up, recognize it, acknowledge it, and then what do we do with that? Because that is a very normal human response. And I think if we start training that way in the academy more, normalizing those exposures and responses, it's going to help them in the long run.
Thank you. Another question is, what resources are available to surviving members of law enforcement that have unfortunately used death by suicide as their exit from this life? And I'm going to turn to Lieutenant Carson because he's had a wealth of experience, unfortunately, with this issue, especially dealing with the Department of Justice and other resources. So, Jay, if you could discuss the resources for aftercare for our fallen families.
Yes, sir. So obviously, in the Fairfax County Police Department, we offer full services to our family members of our officers, sworn and retired. And like I said earlier, unfortunately, we've dealt with some suicides in our agency, and we try to provide the best services we can. We do have on-staff clinicians that we provide the families, but we also try to provide long-term care in a sense that our clinicians will reach out to other clinicians who can take care of these family members for the long run. Blue Help is another program out there, and working with Blue Help, they're starting to run camps for the kids now of officers that have died by suicide, as well as spouses. And I found that having a close relationship with them has been tremendous for us, and being able to provide that. And to talk about Boulder Crest as well. Both Chief Rosser and I have both been to the Boulder Crest program, and I can speak nothing but great things for them. They do a phenomenal job, and I would think that anybody who's been in law enforcement for a number of years should go through their program. Post-traumatic growth has changed the way you look at things through a different lens, and it's very just a great program. And I'm going to give those guys all the props I can. I would recommend any public safety official going through their program.
And I'll also add that the Badge of Life, I sit on the board of directors representing the major city chiefs. Dr. Marla Friedman, who may be on this call, also is another not-for-profit resource that could help respond and rebuild. No more broken cops is their motto. The next question is about retirees. And Sergeant King hit on that a little bit, and we talked about the concept, which I call no blood on your hands. Sergeant King talked about navigating people through the disciplinary process, no matter what the outcome is, but then taking care of our own till their last day on this earth, and hopefully it's a healthy last day, normal process. But how do you take care of retirees and outreach? And I know Sergeant King does that well.
Thank you. One of the biggest things, I could start just with our CISM team. Like I said, they're officers that are volunteers out in the districts, but we have a lot of our retired officers come back and stay on the CISM team. They help us do debriefings. They help us do diffusings. They actively participate in what's going on. We have good partnerships with different, I want to say, philanthropic organizations and retired police organizations that we keep in contact with. One of the biggest services we do, and unfortunately it is, well, two things. When officers are leaving, I have a detective, and one of her main tasks is to work with officers and prep them for retirement, even if it's just a simple walking them through the logistics of City Hall and how to get their paperwork done. What that does is open up conversation for what's underlying the logistics and the emotions and this adjustment of giving up a job that for a lot of people, this has been a major part of their life and identity, being police officers. It's not working at the bank. It is different. And so it's a major thing for a lot of officers, especially if they're going out at mandatory age. It's a crisis in and of itself. If you can recognize it, that it is a crisis, a change of life, and look at it and help and talk to them in that manner, it helps them to make that transition smoother. And we're not getting the phone call 6 months later from the spouse that he's been unfortunately drunk for 3 days and they don't know what to do with him because he doesn't know what to do with himself. I mean, those are the realities of what we get for the phone calls. And lastly, part of my peer support unit, I have another one that's called the family support unit that falls under our structure. And for end of life services, we have announcements that go out daily in the department email for retired officers that have passed. And we ensure through my family support people that funeral arrangements are taken care of, the proper honors are given to them and their family when they do leave, because a lot of these folks, it might be 10 years later, and just to let the families know that they're gone but not forgotten. So those are some of the things we do.
Thank you. And I know in my experience over the many decades, I've learned from peer support members at all different ranks to take care of our retirees. And it's a blessing to share with many on this call that have helped me over the years. We train our retirees to be part of the peer support team. And we have retirees all over the nation, and we network with other agencies, especially those that are on here. So if someone's in crisis several states over, we know who to call and share that police family outreach. But one of the next questions is, does a police department have to have a minimum size to be able to have their own trauma staff, or do smaller departments need to be part of a network to afford 24/7 coverage? And I'll turn to Chief Newsham because this is something I learned from the DC Police Department well over 14 years ago. When you do have that traumatic event in your agency, no matter what size it is, how you share those resources. So, Chief Newsham.
Yeah, I think that's right, Ed. And I think that the larger organizations are obviously going to be able to put more resources to a program like that. But I have yet to come across, as a member of Major City Chiefs, a large police organization that's not willing to assist. And that's the posture I've tried to keep here at MPD. If there are smaller agencies in the region, 100% we're willing to help them. I cannot tell you how much I've learned just listening to some of the suggestions that have been presented on the program here today. So the way that I look at it is we get just as much from the smaller agencies, and I think we owe them to be able to assist them with some of the resources that we have if that's needed.
Thank you, Chief. Another question centers around support of programs and having access to software programs and getting the masses to envelop this, breaking down the stigma. So I know Superintendent Bruce talked about this a little bit. So maybe Superintendent, if you could explore with us a little bit more how those resources are going, especially with the new generation of recruits.
Yeah, that's a very good question indeed. Obviously, the younger folks are much more technically minded. What we've learned a lot about this from our police union and their national conversations between those groups on different apps that are available that younger folks will connect with. That's everything from mental health resources to things like mindfulness. There's a range of them out there. It's like everything else. Once you go looking for it, there's not one or there's not two, but there's 10 or 20 or 30 of these things, and then which is going to be the most appropriate for your agency. But it is a cost-effective method, and certainly You need to be speaking to the right people and speaking to the young folks themselves if you're going to pilot one, to get them to have a look at it and see what their thoughts are on it. But there's definitely opportunities there.
Thank you, Superintendent. Another question is, there are other titles for law enforcement, such as parole agents, probation officers. Uh, there's also obviously a public safety family. There's firefighters and paramedics. And are they situationally covered in the concepts that we're talking about? And this gets back to sharing resources. I know there's lots of great models across this country, but to think of it as a public safety family. I'll again turn to Lieutenant Carson. He's produced in his tenure 2 interactive videos for the Northern Virginia National Capital Region of public safety family members explaining their loved ones who have died of death by suicide, and also their struggle with attempts of death by suicide, and also another video that just came out on alcoholism. But Jay, if you could share how best practice the partner with other public safety agencies.
Whether or not they are considered part of public safety. We did include them as part of public safety in this next survey. We've reached out to all aspects of public safety on the local and federal side. I think we're going to be able to also, we touched on, we're asking a lot of questions about veteran experience, but we're also asking questions about EMTs, firefighters, paramedics. We understand some EMTs, they have separate roles, but we're also looking at corrections officers as well, and those who serve in probation and parole. All those questions are asked in that survey. So we're hoping to capture all that so that really gives us some good detailed information across the country, what the mental health of our first responders looks like. So I'm looking forward to that. So I'm hoping that, in regards to the survey and all of us in public safety, that this surveys can help us advocate for the benefits and the programs that we need throughout our country, especially now after COVID and after the political climate that's out there right now, and how police officers feel villainized. So I hope that answers that question, but we are looking at that. And we do want to include them in public safety.
Okay. The next question centers around practitioner support to leadership, especially in the COVID crisis, civil unrest, and police reforms. And I'll turn back over to Mr. Hyman from DC to talk about how those services are provided to sustain leadership and with all these challenges with today's world.
Yeah, absolutely. And everything in 2020 has been different than usual. I think for us, one of the things that our team has had to do is fairly quickly figure out how to best reach people in a way that follows all CDC guidelines, is recognizes the fact that the majority of our workforce is still in person. But a lot of our programs and our traditional ways of providing information and services wouldn't fall within the guidelines of the CDC. And so, we've pivoted a lot of our programs to virtual. For example, our neuroscience program that I mentioned when I first spoke, we actually broke it into smaller segments that officers can watch in the field as a kind of a virtual video and engagement, with the follow-up opportunity to come and speak either on the phone or in person with our Metropolitan Police Employee Assistance Program staff. As we look forward into the future, we're continuing to look at our wellness programs through the lens of, how can we do this as safely with the ongoing public health emergency? For some of our wellness programs, we've leveraged technology. All of our recruits in our academy, their physical training is done virtually, but it actually works seamless. The instructors monitor their running on a health app in order to see kind of their progress. They participate in group workouts virtually. So we've been able to adapt with very or low or no cost technology into a virtual medium, which frankly reaches some of our employees even better than an in-person format might have. And it allows us a greater audience too.
Thank you. I appreciate that. Well, that's all the time we have for questions. And now it's my honor for our keynote speaker to close us out. It's Representative Abigail Spanberger. Um, Representative Spanberger represents the 7th Congressional District of Virginia, which is comprised of 10 counties throughout the Commonwealth of Virginia. She began a career in public service, first serving as a federal agent with the U.S. Postal Inspection, investigating money laundering and narcotic cases, and then serving as a case officer with the Central Intelligence Agency, otherwise known as the CIA. In the House, Representative Spanberger serves the U.S. House Committee on Agriculture and the U.S. House Committee on Foreign Affairs. Thank you, Representative, for being with us today, and appreciate listening to you. Thank you.
Thank you very much. I'd like to begin by thanking the National Law Enforcement Memorial and Museum for the opportunity to be a part of today's discussion on a very important and too often overlooked issue, the mental health and wellness of our nation's police professionals. I appreciate the opportunity to be here with you all today virtually, and I am thankful to be included along a slate of amazing speakers and experts on these issues. I'm grateful for the opportunity to listen to some of the questions and answers and hear the fantastic things that are happening across our communities in response to some of the biggest challenges that you all are facing in your departments nationwide. While I do wish that we could be meeting in person, I am nevertheless humbled to speak with you today. You are leaders who embody our country's proud tradition of service. Your mission to keep our communities and our citizens safe is an important one, and it's one of our most fundamental responsibilities as a nation. I'd like to say thank you to all the law enforcement officers on the call today. Thank you for your service and thank you for your sacrifice. I'd also like to thank your families for their sacrifice and for their understanding that your work and your commitment to our communities across the country is part of who you are. I am the daughter of a career law enforcement officer, and I know what it is to have a loved one, or in my case, a parent, who works odd hours, faces unique stresses, and who lives by a code of service to others. Having been a law enforcement officer briefly with the U.S. Postal Inspection Service, I am grateful to those who dedicate their careers to public service and keeping our communities safe and secure. And as a representative for Virginia's 7th Congressional District, I have had the privilege of meeting many of the amazing officers across Central Virginia who have answered the call to serve our communities. And I'm grateful to the chiefs of police and the sheriffs across the 10 counties I represent who have shared with me the experiences, the challenges, and the concerns that are impacting their officers. I'm grateful for the chance to learn from you all today as you answer questions, share your experiences, and continue to advocate for your officers and for the greater public safety family. On Capitol Hill, I believe it is my responsibility, the responsibility of all members of Congress, to provide law enforcement officers serving our country with the support and the resources they need to fulfill their duties responsibly, professionally, and safely. And I've taken action on this belief with my colleagues by supporting initiatives to improve the safety of law enforcement officers across our country and advocate for justice for those whose families have lost a loved one in the line of duty. In Congress, we've authorized the Bulletproof Vest Partnership Grant Program, and it was recently signed into law. And along with many of my colleagues, I'm a supporter of the First Responders Survivor Support Act, which would support the families of fallen first responders, law enforcement officers, and firefighters killed in the line of duty by increasing death benefits for families. And most recently, I backed the Jaime Zapata and Victor Avilla Federal Law Enforcement Protection Act, which would ensure that individuals who do harm or attempt to harm U.S. federal law enforcement officers serving abroad can be brought to justice and prosecuted in the United States. These are basic steps that we can take to show that we have the backs of our law enforcement, but protecting the physical safety of law enforcement officers is not the only step we should take. According to Blue Help, there have been 869 officer suicides since 2016. And in 2019, the group calculated that the officer suicide rate is 22.4 per 100,000 officers. This is serious, it is tragic, and it is unacceptable. We cannot ignore these numbers, and I'm so grateful for the work that you all are doing to speak frankly and directly about the challenges facing your officers in your department and the work that you all are doing to help them. When an officer is struggling with mental health issues, serious problems can arise in their work, in their home, in their community. And by raising awareness of the mental health needs of law enforcement officers, we can provide them with the help they need to do their jobs better and improve policing overall. At the end of the day, I believe that providing strong mental health services for law enforcement is simply our responsibility as a country. And we must ensure that we take care of those who devote their careers to the service and the sacrifice that they give as law enforcement officers. That's why I'm a supporter of the Law Enforcement Suicide Data Collection Act. This bill, which was passed into law this past June, establishes a data collection program within the FBI to compile data on suicides and attempted suicides in law enforcement at the local, state, and federal level, with the intent of helping to prevent and understand law enforcement suicides. Today, this crisis takes on a particular importance as police departments, local sheriffs, and public safety officials across the country have been asked to take on so much more in light of the ongoing public health crisis. And while I'm thankful for the way our professional law enforcement officers have stepped up to the plate across the country, I have heard directly from local sheriffs and police chiefs about the challenges facing their departments here in Virginia. Increased calls for domestic disturbances, increased calls for mental health crises, and increased numbers of overdoses, all while officers contend with the risk of potential exposure to a deadly virus. These are challenges facing the men and women serving our communities in law enforcement, and recognizing these challenges, particularly in this ongoing time of the pandemic, is incredibly important. A failure to invest in community services like mental health and social services increasingly leaves police officers in the position of stepping in as crisis counselors for those on the edge, a job they so often had not trained for. And a failure to fund these services not only means that those needing mental health services may not be able to get the help they need, it places undue stress and challenges on our local law enforcement officers and strains the resources of our departments. We know that post-traumatic stress disorder among police officers is 5 times more prevalent than in the general population, and that this disorder impacts supporting personnel as well, which is why I've helped push forward the 911 Saves Act. This bill would reclassify 911 dispatchers as first responders, which increases their access to benefits centered on the treatment of occupational-related conditions like post-traumatic stress disorder. While these pieces of legislation are steps forward, by no means they will alone address the mental health challenges faced by law enforcement officers. That is one of the reasons why I'm so grateful to the National Law Enforcement Memorial and Museum for hosting today's event and bringing this conversation forward. Today, we've had an opportunity to reflect on this issue. We've listened to experts, to the lessons they have learned in working to enhance officer wellness programs, contribute to suicide prevention, and reduce the mental wellness stigma. And thank you for connecting all of us together on this critically important issue. With my personal history as someone who hears the stories of officers in our communities almost every day, this cause is personal to me. And I hope this event has an opportunity to redouble our united commitment to creating an environment that embraces mental health for our law enforcement officers. And I hope we can build on a foundation that's provided by the panelists that the panelists today have provided this afternoon. I would like to encourage all of those who are listening to be in touch with my office in the months to come. I welcome your ideas for how else we can make our country a stronger home for those who continue to serve in the law enforcement community. Thank you again for having me join you today, and thank you for our service. Thank you for your service to our communities and our country.
Thank you for tuning in to this Encore series of Preventing Death by Suicide, a chief-to-chief leadership wellness discussion. Tune back in with us on May 3rd when Nick Brule, the Officer Safety and Wellness Senior Project Manager, stops by the studio to share his thoughts on the recent Safe Leo conference held at the museum. We thank you for your support, and remember, our upcoming episode releases are every Wednesday, and published exclusively on Tuesdays is our monthly Icons episode. We hope you learned something from this episode of Encore and will join us next time for another edition of Encore, where we revisit past museum programs and conversations. For more information on this program, follow the link in the episode description. A special thanks to all of you for listening to this episode of Encore, a series from the Precinct 444 Podcast Network by the National Law Enforcement Museum. Please subscribe to Precinct 444 on your favorite podcasting platform to stay connected and to receive our latest content as soon as it drops. We would love to hear from you. Send in your questions, comments, and feedback to precinct444@nleomf.org. You can help us make our content even better. The National Law Enforcement Museum is located at 444 East Street Northwest in Washington, D.C., and is dedicated to telling the story of American law enforcement. We expand and enrich the relationship between law enforcement and the community through educational journeys, immersive exhibitions, and insightful programs. Find us online at lawenforcementmuseum.org and stay tuned for more podcast content from Precinct 444. Until next time, stay safe. We'll see you at the precinct.